impeachment articles for the fraudster in chief, Tim Walz.
I have articles of impeachment against Attorney General Keith Ellison.
We have a massive update coming out of Minnesota, where state Republican lawmakers filed articles of impeachment against Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison over their alleged cover-up of the fraud that's been running wild throughout Minnesota. Welcome, my name is Shane, and if you want daily reporting that breaks the narrative, please consider subscribing. Let us get into it, starting with this article that's titled, GOP Lawmakers Introduce Impeachment Articles Against Walz and Ellison. And the article go on to say, Republican lawmakers introduced two House resolutions on Monday, House Resolution 6 on the impeachment of Governor Tim Walz and House Resolution 7 on the impeachment of Attorney General Keith Ellison. The article went on to accuse both Ellison and Walz of corrupt conduct and went on to accuse Ellison of crimes and misdemeanors, right? And I think this is the most important part. The resolution introduced on Monday accuses Walz of violating his constitutional oath to faithfully execute the laws of the state. The resolution cites his response to the state's fraud case. And this right here is very interesting as well. The Ellison resolution accuses him of undermining the FACE Act by defending the anti-ICE protesters and journalists who protested at a St. Paul church. It also references a meeting Ellison had with future defendants in the feeding or future fraud case. So this is massive right here, and we have a video of these state Republicans actually talking about these articles of impeachment. Take a look.
Hey folks, Representative Drew Roach here. Here with my other colleagues from the Minnesota Freedom Caucus, here to do the work for the people.
Representative Ben Davis, folks, and in my hands I have articles of impeachment against Attorney General Keith Ellison. As I'm sure you're aware, he had the Feeding Our Future fraudsters in his office doing an alleged quid pro quo. He's not fit for office.
Representative Mike Weiner. Impeachment articles for the fraudster in chief, Tim Walz. Holding politicians accountable, holding him accountable for the massive amount of fraud in the state of Minnesota. Estimated $9 billion taxpayers' money that is being wasted. Ready to drop this.
Now that we know that articles of impeachment have been filed against Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison over their handling of the fraud, the question is, what will it take for these individuals to be impeached? The resolutions have been filed and they're still in the House. There are 134 members in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And what it'll take a simple majority for these resolutions to be passed. There are 67 Republicans and 67 Democrats. So basically what that means is that all Republicans need to vote yes. And then there needs to be one Democrat, at least one Democrat, to vote yes with the Republicans. So they'll have 68 votes. And that will be a simple majority. And then these two individuals will be impeached. And after they're impeached, they'll be suspended from office, suspended from carrying out their duties. And after that, after these resolutions have been voted on, it'll go to the Senate for trial, for either acquittal or conviction. And that is when you run into a little bit of issue. Because in the Senate, you'll need a 2/3 majority. And there are 67 total members. There are 33 Republicans and 34 Democrats. So basically what that means, in order for them to essentially convict Governor Tim Walz and Keith Ellison in the Senate, is that 12 Democrats need to shift over to the Republican side. If all three Republicans vote yes. And that is where you run into a little bit of issue, because we don't know if that many Democrats are going to vote to convict Keith Ellison and Governor Tim Walz. And with that being said, let me know in the comment section below, do you think Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison will be impeached, or will this die somewhere in the Senate or in the House? And this is not the only thing that's going on with Attorney General Keith Ellison, because he's trying to distract from this impeachment. Because what he's doing now, he's trying to sue the Trump administration. And we have an article here that says fraud-plagued Minnesota sues Trump administration for withholding $243 million in Medicaid payments. The article go on to say that Attorney General Keith Ellison is suing the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, arguing that the funding freeze violates federal law. The state is seeking a temporary restraining order to immediately block this action. And here we have a video reporting on this action taken by Minnesota and Attorney General Keith Ellison. Take a look.
Yeah, right now, the state of Minnesota says it may have to cut back health care for low-income families if that funding you mentioned is held back. And it's why Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and the State Department of Health and Human Services is suing the Trump administration, attempting to get that money back. Now, this lawsuit, filed on Monday, is asking a U.S. court to issue a temporary restraining order to block the feds from halting $243 million in Medicaid funding, which is the health care safety net for low-income Americans. Now, this comes after the Trump administration announced it would pause $259 million in Medicaid funds. More than 1 million Minnesotans rely on Medicaid for their health insurance. This lawsuit names the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Director, Dr. Mehmet Oz, and the Department of Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It claims the administration violated due process procedures, the Constitution, and failed to provide the state with details about its decision. In a statement to our newsroom, Ellison says, in part, quote, "The Trump administration's MO is to cut first, no matter what the law says or who gets hurt, and ask questions later, if at all. These cuts are the latest in a long series of efforts to go around the law to punish Minnesotans." Now, of course, this comes after J.D. Vance, Vice President J.D. Vance's announcement to freeze funding, and the administration overall wants stronger oversight in the state of Minnesota, especially for high-risk programs. And here's
So this right here means the state is in complete panic because, for one, Governor Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, Jacob Fry, all of them allowed fraud to run rampant throughout the state. And now the federal government, they launched a war on fraud where they're not going to be paying out any form of federal assistance to these states because of all the fraud that's going on, unless they fix all this fraud. And now Keith Ellison, instead of announcing a program where they're going to fight against fraud, what he's doing, he's trying to sue the Trump administration. And if you don't remember the reason why the Trump administration actually announced this freeze of this federal funding, take a look at J.D. Vance's explanation of this. Take a look.
So we're announcing today that we have decided to temporarily halt certain amounts of Medicaid funding that are going to the state of Minnesota in order to ensure that the state of Minnesota takes its obligations seriously to be good stewards of the American people's tax money. Now, what is this going to mean? What this means is that, first of all, the providers on the ground in Minnesota have actually already been paid. The state has paid those providers the money. What we're doing is we are stopping the federal payments that will go to the state government until the state government takes its obligations seriously to stop the fraud that's being perpetrated against the American tax.
So that was J.D. Vance on the reason why they withheld that money, that federal funding, and it's literally to go after fraudsters. And Keith Ellison, he hasn't done anything to prosecute these individuals, these fraudsters. He hasn't announced a program to crack down on these fraudsters. And Tim Walz isn't any better. He hasn't announced a program to go after these fraudsters. He hasn't announced a plan to go after these fraudsters. And we have a video of Tim Walz saying he's the most anti-fraud person. Take a look.
I don't know why this is so hard to understand, and I will continue to say this. You can trust me on this. The person who's angriest about this fraud is me. There is certainly no political upside to having fraud in your state, and it undermines the very program that I have spent a lifetime advocating for and trying to implement, and we have got criminals.
My question is, if Tim Walz was the angriest person at the fraudsters, then why don't we see people being arrested? Why don't we see accountability? Why don't we see a program being rolled out to essentially prevent this fraud? Why does it have to take the federal government, the Trump administration, to take care of your state? Because all these programs that were put in place for these fraudsters to take advantage of was implemented by Minnesota. So why does it have to take the federal government if you're the angriest at the fraudsters? That is the question. And here we have a Congressman, Randy Fine, speaking of how Governor Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, and Ilhan Omar, how they're complicit in this fraud. Take a look.
Do you foresee other states getting, pauses on their Medicare funding, et cetera?
Absolutely, because I think what we're seeing in Minnesota is the fraud was not a bug, it was a feature. Politicians like Ellison and Tim Walz knew exactly what was going on. They had been warned about it, but this was basically a pay-for-votes scam where they were giving these communities money and they were getting campaign contributions back. I think this will entangle Ilhan Omar and many, many other Democrat politicians who knew exactly what was going on, were encouraging it, and were personally benefiting from it. They all need to go to jail.
Now, let me know in the comment section below, do you agree with the congressman that Tim Walz, Ellison, and Omar knew exactly what was going on with these fraudsters? And that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Please consider liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.